Man, I don't know how to intro these videos anymore, and I've only done 10 of them so far. I suppose I could keep the same intro for each. Wait, shit, is this recording already? Shit. How's it going, everyone? My name is Crysis, and for the 11th time this year, yeah, I like movies. This time, as much as September, because I saw another 20 movies, and that was with a good few weekends where I didn't see anything. Regardless, it was a pretty good month, so without any further delay, let's get right into the reviews, shall we? Starting off the month a few days late, I caught Violent Ends, starring Billy Magnuson, and you know the one Doctor Who quote? Oh, man, the one about a good man, something, something, something?
Demons run when a good man goes to war. Night will fall and drown the sun when a good man goes to war.
Yeah, that one. This movie is a fantastic example of that. Billy Magnuson did a phenomenal job in the lead role, finding the line between apathetic and stoic, and staying more on the stoic side. Also, the way that they got me to care about the fiancée in the short time that we see her was amazing. Not a spoiler, by the way, because it was quite literally in the description of the movie. I actually cared about their relationship and wanted good things for them, and then everything went to shit, because of course it did. Was it a perfect movie? No, but it didn't need to be, at least in my opinion. Just a fun romp through 1990s Arkansas, and that's exactly what it was. So it'll get an 8 out of 10. Up next was something that was more of an impulse watch than anything else. Self-Help, a strange horror comedy Charlie Foxtrot, and yet, after having read the description for this movie, it is exactly what I expected from it, with nothing really out of the ordinary one way or the other. It was your standard thriller, with a standard story and above standard acting, at least from the main character, played by Landry Bender. It was also a weird case, at least to me, of too many antagonists, but not enough villains. It seemed that there were too many people in the movie that were working against the goals of the protagonist, but not enough of them actually trying to do anything to harm her. The only one who did that was dealt with fairly quickly with a quip that really didn't need to happen, at least to me. Overall, it was just your standard indie thriller, but that's not really a bad thing, so it'll get a self-actualizing 6.5 out of 10. The next day, I walked into an IMAX early access showing of Predator Badlands, starring Demetrius Schuster-Koloamatangi and Elle Fanning. This was everything I was hoping it would be, and a few things that I didn't know I wanted out of a movie in the Predator franchise, especially with the Yautja as the protagonist. It was really interesting how it further cemented the idea that the Predator and Alien franchises take place in the same shared universe, and that just furthered the enjoyment I felt watching everything happen. Deck was absolutely badass, and despite being the runt of his clan, he was absolutely a badass motherfucker, showing off the skills that we've seen in other Predator movies, just turned up to 11 this time. It was also the perfect length and runtime, honestly, and it felt a lot shorter than it actually was. Damn it, now I want to see this again just to get that adrenaline high. Fantastic movie, and Dan Trachtenberg is now 3 out of 3 on fantastic Predator movies. This one gets a solid 10 out of 10, and I hope for more absolute bangers in the future. Following that up a few days later was Die My Love, the latest movie flick starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, and it was... Well, I honestly don't know how to feel about this movie. On the one hand, it might just be an instance of me not getting the movie, and I'll be the first to admit that. On the other hand, the majority of the movie didn't need to happen, and it was just weirdly acted, directed, and had some truly strange creative choices throughout the entire runtime. It's also another instance of none of the characters being likable, so I'm never really rooting for anyone to win or have anything close to a happy ending. Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson did the best with what they were given, but what they were given wasn't really all that good to begin with, at least in my opinion. It was just so strange and off the whole time, and as with a few other movies this year, it felt like the first draft of something that could have been better if it had gone through the draft process a few more times. To me, it was just a massive fumble, so it'll get a 2.5 out of 10. The next day was a doubleheader, starting with a screen unseen that turned out to be A24's latest rom-com, Eternity, starring Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller, and Callum Turner. And yeah, the more I see Elizabeth Olsen in projects outside of Marvel, I'm more convinced that her talents, and the talents of most of the actors in the MCU, are being wasted and stifled while waiting for these projects to see the light of day. For the movie itself, it was a really cute, if predictable, rom-com, though this time everyone in the movie is dead. It's also a kind of strange commentary on the whole love at first sight, and the ramifications that come with it in a way. The whole cast gives it their all, from the older couple we initially see as Joan and Larry, to those in the afterlife in Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller, and Callum Turner, even to the children that are the happiest versions of some of the characters, which led to a few of the funniest scenes in this movie. My only gripe was that it ended about a half hour too late, but then it pulled me back in with the last half hour, so that gripe is mostly moot. Overall, it was a really cute, if mildly predictable movie, but in this case, that's not a bad thing, so it'll spend eternity at 9.5 out of 10. The second movie of that doubleheader was one that I kept seeing pre-trailer previews for weeks after it released, Nuremberg, starring Rami Malek, Russell Crowe, and a few others. Now, whoever wrote this movie had massive guts because it took a massive risk right out the gates. It tried to make the Nazis, specifically Hermann Goering, sympathetic. While I'm not complaining about the aspect of having a sympathetic antagonist, making that antagonist in a post-World War II movie a Nazi was maybe not the best choice. That being said, though, Russell Crowe did do a fantastic job at disgusting the audience with his sickening charm, including his reactions during the trial itself, which, by the way, was a very minor aspect of the movie, but that's neither here nor there. The rest of the cast, bloated though it was, did great, though it felt like Rami Malek played the same character he always does, a lone wolf who has to do everything himself, to hell with the consequences. That's not really his fault, more that of the filmmakers, but I could only ever really see Rami Malek, not Douglas Kelly. Overall, it was a very good movie, but one that was stifled by a bloated runtime and cast of big-name actors, so it'll get a 7.5. The next day was an early access showing of Sentimental Value, starring Stellan Skarsgård, Renate Reinsve, and Elle Fanning. Man, I wish more international movies like this would be released in the States because holy shit, this was great. From the story to the acting to some of the more minor details, almost everything was just plain amazing. The reason that I say almost everything, though, is due to one editing choice of adding a second and a half of just a black screen in between scenes. It's just an annoying editing choice, and anytime I see it in a movie, it takes me out of the movie. Everything else was amazing, though. Stellan Skarsgård, Renate Reinsve, and Elle Fanning were all fantastic in their lead and supporting roles, respectively, and every single part of their performances felt believable. The three in the family, being Reinsve, Skarsgård, and Inga Ibsdottir Lilleas, actually felt like they were a family through their interactions, love for one another, and yes, even the fights they would have. It was just a beautiful movie, only marred by the editing between scenes, so it'll get a 9.5. Following that up, almost 24 hours later, was the latest magician heist movie, whose title should have been the title of the second one, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, starring Jesse Eisenberg, Dave Franco, Isla Fisher, Woody Harrelson, Dominic Sessa, Ariana Greenblatt, and Justice Smith. Holy shit, why do so many big-time movies recently have such bloated casts? For the actual movie itself, though, random bullshit, Thy Name Is Now You See Me. For the third time, too. This one, though, does a better job of explaining everything, as opposed to the second one, where it literally looked like they were doing legitimate, inexplicable magic. There was still some inexplicable stuff here, but this is at least slightly better. The whole cast is great, with special props going to the newcomers in the series in Justice Smith, Ariana Greenblatt, and Dominic Sessa. The story was so-so, but it's exactly the kind of random crap you would expect from one of these movies, so I'm okay with it. I wasn't okay with how contrived they had to make the story in order to get to the ending, but it was a mildly enjoyable ride nonetheless. Plus, there is a long shot in the movie where they do a whole bunch of magic that I would love to see the behind the scenes for, but that'll have to wait until it gets to streaming. Overall, not as good as the first, but better than the second. I would watch it again, but really only to get caught up for any sequels. With everything in mind, this third installment beats the curse brought up by X-Men Apocalypse and is a solid movie, earning it a 7 out of 10. The next day started another doubleheader, and I wish I had only seen the second one. However, that's not the movie we're talking about right now. Right now, we are talking about the abomination that is The Carpenter's Son, led by Nicolas Cage. I can't really describe my full complaints with this movie without getting into spoiler territory, so I'll just say this. Even as a Methodist Christian, this movie was just straight up offensive, and I am not surprised that Egypt refused them permission to film this in their country. I honestly don't know what made them tell this story in the way that they do in this movie, and just so many of the events in this movie directly contradict what we know as biblical truth that it's a wonder anyone looked at this as a good idea at all. According to the IMDb trivia, Nicolas Cage, who plays Joseph, yes, that Joseph, was in this movie to give a middle finger to Robert Eggers after Eggers said he can't see Cage in his movies, and after this travesty, I'm inclined to agree with Eggers. Fuck this movie. It's getting a 0.5 out of 10, and I am moving on. Following that up was something significantly better, if only because it wasn't just outright blasphemous. Trap House, starring Dave Bautista, Jack Champion, and Sophia Lillis. Does this story make sense at all? Hell no. Is it a fun ride? Yeah, kinda. Predictable, yeah, but that means you can just turn your brain off and enjoy the B-movie schlock that we get. Dave Bautista and Bobby Cannavale lead the charge as the DEA agents, who are more than a little oblivious, while Jack Champion leads Sophia Lillis, Whitney Peake, and Zaire Adams on a quest to get some money for one of their friends by... Hold on, robbing the cartel? What the shit? Why would they ever think this was a good idea? Okay, story shenanigans aside, it was a really fun movie, and one that I'd watch again if I had nothing better to do, so it'll get a 7.5 out of 10. A couple days later, I checked into a Dolby Cinema early access screening of Hamnet, the fictional story behind the creation of Shakespeare's Hamlet, starring Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal. First off, I actually cried watching this, and that's something that hasn't happened while watching a movie in a good long while. Not heavily, mind you, but enough to get me to take my glasses off to wipe away the tears. Second, from a story perspective, this hurt to watch because of the heartbreak that you can see throughout the film on each of the characters' faces. Everyone has a superb performance, though I'm still not exactly sold on Paul Mescal as Shakespeare himself, though to be fair, he's not the focal point of this movie. Jessie Buckley perfectly portrayed the pain that her character goes throughout the movie, and it just hurt to watch, but in a good way. Well, not good, but y'all know what I mean. It was just damn perfect, so Hamnet will receive the second 12 out of 10 for the year. The following day, AMC's Screen Unseen program treated us to Sisu, Road to Revenge, and it was exactly what the title suggests. Sometimes all you need out of a movie is a silent protagonist that kicks ass for no other reason than revenge. No sob story, no pretentious, I'm better than you, so I'll let you live. None of that bullshit. Just a good old-fashioned revenge story, and it works. Okay, well, there is a sob story, but that's mostly shown in the trailers where the bad guy, played by Stephen Lang, killed the protag's family. And that actually brings me to my only gripe with the film. Stephen Lang's accent. Love the actor, don't get me wrong, but his accent kept switching between Russian and like a pseudo-German accent, which made it hard to take him seriously as a villain when he keeps making his threats. Other than that, though, the combat was badass, the kills were merciless, and it was all around a very good time. It did feel a little short, but it would have dragged on too long otherwise, so that's kind of a moot point, I guess. With everything in mind here, Road to Revenge will ride the train to an easy 8.5. Up next was a movie whose trailer I had only seen once or twice, but it intrigued me enough to go see it. King Ivory. And for just the second time this year, I almost wish that this would have been a TV show. The main issue that I have with King Ivory is that it was packed too full to be a 2-hour movie, leading to a point where I didn't really care about any of the characters on screen because I was having to juggle whose perspective and goals I was following at the time. We have the main character who is a drug enforcement cop, the main bad guy who is a trafficker/drug dealer, a secondary bad guy who is a go-between between the main bad guy and a different group, an illegal immigrant who is just running drugs around the city, and the main character's son and his girlfriend, and I don't really care about any of them. That being said, though, the story itself is pretty good. Set in a condensed timeline and showing some of the actual police work behind a drug enforcement division, it tells its story in a mostly good way, with a few unnecessary scenes, at least to me, to get where it needs to go. Overall, pretty decent, if a bit long and crowded in the telling of its own story, so it'll get a passing grade of 6.5 out of 10. Following the downward slide of movie quality, the next movie I walked into I almost wish I hadn't, only because it was a sequel to a movie I hadn't seen yet. Muzzle, City of Wolves, starring Aaron Eckhart. Well, the fact that it was a sequel to a movie I hadn't seen yet, and the fact that it was just bad and confusing, but that's beside the point. The weird thing is, this movie is decent at best and downright confusing as hell at worst. I left with way more questions than answers by the end of it, including why the hell the main character was being hunted in the first place. There's really no explanation given, or if there was, it was so dull and at the very beginning of the movie that I forgot it 2 minutes later. City of Wolves is also super full of itself and thought way too highly of itself because it opened with a Nietzsche quote of all things. The more I think about this movie, the more it just pisses me off. The villain stays in the shadows the whole time, nothing is ever explained as to what happens or why, and the ending is just plain stupid. I would only recommend watching this if you've seen the first one, and even then only if it's in your top 10 movies of all time. There are much better on-the-run rampage movies out there, and this is not one of them. It's getting a 2.5 out of 10, and that's mostly only because of the dogs that were in the movie. A few days later, I took a trip to a spooky cabin in the woods, but not that cabin in the woods, to see Keeper, starring Tatiana Maslany and Rossif Sutherland. As with One Battle After Another a few months ago, I just don't understand the praise that this movie is getting. I can understand a movie being slow in its storytelling, and some of my favorite movies this year have been slower told stories. However, when it's a horror movie, you don't really have the liberty or luxury to be super slow in your storytelling, especially with how few scares there were in the movie itself. There were also a few short clips that really didn't need to be in the movie at all, and keeping them in just slowed down the pacing even more. The ending didn't feel earned and just felt super off, especially given the rest of the movie. The acting was fine, I guess, but as a whole it just didn't work for me, so it's getting a 3.5 out of 10. The next day, I went to a Stephen King dystopian future and saw The Running Man, starring Glenn Powell, Josh Brolin, and Coleman Domingo, amongst other stars that appeared throughout the runtime. For me, this version of The Running Man showed its strengths in its action and music rather than the story it was telling. It felt like there was a lot of unnecessary fluff that was added just to pad the runtime when it didn't really need to be there at all. That being said, however, it was still a very fun ride from start to finish. Glenn Powell did great in the lead role, with Lee Pace, Coleman Domingo, and Josh Brolin filling in the villain roles perfectly. The story was fine, exactly what one would expect from an adaptation of a Stephen King book, but it was still really good until it decided to get really preachy with its message. Like, we get it, corporation's bad, but it just thought way too much of itself for me to actually care about any kind of message in an action movie. Other than that, though, it was really good, and it was overall a success, at least to me, earning it a 7.5 out of 10. A couple days later, after a bit of a runaround the day before with a movie that I'll end up seeing sometime in December, I caught Rental Family, starring Brendan Fraser, Takahiro Hira, and Shannon Mahina Gorman. Goddamn stupid fucking onion-cutting ninjas. Fuck! How does a movie about Brendan Fraser being the, and I quote from the movie, token white guy be one of the best and most emotional movies I've seen this year? A beautiful story, scenery, and loads of beautifully constructed characters, and it's just a great version of the world to see. It also showed me how much I don't know about other cultures outside of the US, with how much I was surprised at some of the reasonings behind things. Seeing those culture shocks through Fraser's character's eyes was really eye-opening and helped envelop me in the movie. All of the relationships were realistic, the conversations were both heartfelt and realistic, but never forced, and it was overall just one of those movies where it hurts to watch, but it's something that I think everyone should see at least once in their lives. It'll definitely be going on my list of movies to watch if I need a good cry, and it will get the only 15 out of 10 for the year, and really ever for me. The next day, right before Thanksgiving, I traveled to Oz to catch the end of The Tale of Elphaba Throp, Wicked for Good, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jonathan Bailey, Jeff Goldblum, Michelle Yeoh, and Ethan Slater. Now, I'll preface this by saying nothing in this movie was objectively bad, even the original songs that were created for the movie version of Act 2 of the original musical. That being said, though, those original songs were the weakest part of the movie for me, especially when they were inserted in moments that felt awkward or just wrong to have singing in them. Other than that, though, the story was fun, the acting was great, and the adaptations of the songs from the original production were amazing. It did feel a bit too long, just like the first one, but it definitely felt a lot shorter than the first one, despite only half an hour difference in length. All this to say, though, it was really good, and it was a great finale to this duology of Wicked, though I do think it would have worked slightly better as just one movie. However, this movie was anything but Wicked, and it was extremely good, so it'll get an 8.5, and it'll stay there for good. Next up, as the first movie in a doubleheader to end the month on the last day of November, I caught Zootopia 2, starring Jennifer Goodwin, Jason Bateman, and Kiwi Kwan, amongst a ginormous list of celebrity voices in this movie. Like, holy shit. Now, Zootopia 2 is a weird sequel. It builds on the world and lore of the Zootopia series, yes, but it also seems heavily reliant on references and nods to bits and memes that it struggles to stand under its own weight. That's not to say it's a bad movie or anything, far from it. The voice acting from, well, everyone that was in it was great. From the big roles given to Jennifer Goodwin and Jason Bateman as Judy and Nick, respectively, to the smaller roles given to Robert Irwin, Dwayne Johnson, and Josh Gad. The story itself was kind of a retread of the original, just on a slightly larger scale, no pun intended, but given that it's a kids' movie, I'm sure the intended audience didn't really care. Overall, it was a solid movie, and an okay Disney movie, but I would hesitate to recommend seeing this in theaters. It'll get 7 shed snake scales out of 10, and hopefully it's a lot warmer there than it is here. Finally, ending the month of November on a slightly worse note, only slightly though, was the latest in Benoit Blanc's escapades around the world, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery starring Daniel Craig, Josh O'Connor, Glenn Close, and Josh Brolin. This movie is just strange to me. On the one hand, it was well acted from the whole cast, the story was good for about 80% of the movie, and the setting was nice. On the other hand, its setting seemed misplaced for the characters it had. No one really matched the energy in their characters that Daniel Craig had in Benoit Blanc, and the last 20% of the movie just tried to be too smart for its own good, which led to a lot of confusion, especially given the explanation of everything. The one thing that just rubbed me the wrong way the whole time was the portrayal of Josh Brolin's character versus Josh O'Connor's character. While I'm sure that there are heads that butt like theirs do in the real world, it felt more like Rian Johnson and the screenwriters were trying to make a commentary on modern religion and politics, especially when it relates to religion, rather than making an intriguing murder mystery movie. I'd say wait for it to be on Netflix, and even then, I don't know if this would serve as anything better than background noise while doing chores. Actually, I feel like that would be a bad idea considering how convoluted it gets. Regardless, this mystery keeps the series going, I guess, but not in a manner that worked, at least to me, so it'll get a 6.5 out of 10. In the month of November, I saw a total of 20 movies for an average rating of 7.3. I walked into only 2 of those not knowing what I was seeing, those being Eternity and Sisu, Road to Revenge. I spent a grand total of $45.70, just under a quarter of what I saved, that being $201.87. I can't wait until next month's video to tell you all how much I saved in total because, yeah, it's already insane seeing that stat every month. To not so briefly recap what I saw in order of quality, according to me. We had Rental Family at the top with the year's only 15, Hamnet joining Eleanor the Great with a 12, Predator Badlands getting a 10, Eternity and Sentimental Value tied at 9.5, Sisu Road to Revenge and Wicked for Good tied at 8.5, Violent Ends on its own at 8, a 3-way tie between Nuremberg, Trap House, and The Running Man at 7.5, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, and Zootopia tied at 7, Another three-way tie between Self-Help, King Ivory, and Wake Up Dead Man, A Knives Out Mystery at 6.5, Keeper on its own at 3.5, Die My Love and Muzzle, City of Wolves tied at 2.5, and last and certainly least for the month of November, we had The Carpenter's Son at 0.5 point. As always, if you want a full review of any of these movies, spoiler and all, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get around to making that. After the year's over at this point, probably. Holy shit. With everything seen through this month, I've now seen 210 movies. Damn. December looks like it'll be a shorter month, as not many movies are releasing that I want to see, or I've already seen them earlier in the year. Although there is the matter of the streaming movies I've missed and the other theatrical releases that I've missed, so that may not be the case after all. We'll see though, and as always, I hope you'll take me up on some of these recommendations and see something that I saw, specifically Rental Family. If not, oh well, I can only hope. I'm a movie review guy on YouTube, not a cop. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and happy viewing.